Hello YouTubers out there, this is Jerry Saravia at the movies. So let's talk about Obi Wan Kenobi, well the third episode, directed by Deborah Chow, who directed the first two episodes and has also directed episodes of The Mandalorian. Now, as you know, on this channel I look at movies, TV shows, and TV movies on occasion, anything associated particularly with Star Wars. I will talk about infrequently on television, but nonetheless, this is something we should talk about. And because it seems that there are quite a few people who are a little bit pissed off, to say the least, at this third episode of Obi Wan Kenobi, which is streaming now on Disney+. And they showed the premiere of the third episode last Wednesday. So what is it that they are upset about? Well, first, a brief outline on what happens in this third episode. We see Darth Vader, really for the first time, since, I guess we could say since Rogue One, in as far as film or streaming, TV if you like. So he appears and he instructs Reva, the third sister, to find Kenobi. And he promises to promote her to Grand Inquisitor if she succeeds. Now, mind you, for those of you who have been keeping up, in the second episode, Reva kills with her red lightsaber the other Grand Inquisitor, played by Rupert Friend. So she already shows herself to be a formidable villain. She seems quite dangerous, I would say. But others feel differently. As you know, the actress herself, Moses Ingram, on Instagram has been receiving direct messages that are nothing less than racist. At least this is what she claims. I do believe her. I mean, I'm not saying I don't. But nonetheless, that's a story for another time. So, Kenobi and little Leia, in their transport, they land on the mining planet called Mapuso. And there they are provided by some sort of a rendezvous provided by Haja, who you recall in the second episode was played by Camille Nanjiani, who was pretending to be a Jedi, but he was really more of a huckster or con man. He tells Kenobi, you know, they can meet up with somebody that will help them, I guess, take Leia back to Alderaan. And one thing after another happens between an Imperial droid, which was nice to see, an Imperial transport. Eventually, Kenobi confronts Darth Vader. This was a part of the story I didn't quite understand, but keep in mind that at the end of the second episode, Obi Wan Kenobi discovers that Anakin Skywalker is still alive. So he assumed that on that planet of Mustafar, the lava planet, that he died. And his shock at the end of that second episode was really quite powerful, I thought. It was very appropriate. So he assumed, which, you know, I hadn't expected, that for that decade that had passed, in which Kenobi was working as in a meat factory, of all things, and living off the grid, so to speak, that he would be found by Reva and everyone else. And so there is an ally that Kenobi has. It's he receives help from a female Imperial officer named Tala, who's actually a member of some underground network that hides dissidents and outlaws hunted by the Empire. Vader arrives on this mining planet, but Kenobi, rather than going with Leia through this tunnel of sorts to get to a ship, sticks around and sees Vader, I guess because he can't believe that Anakin Skywalker has become this Darth Vader person. And there is a lightsaber battle between them, which is a bit awkward because Kenobi is not in full control of his faculties with regards to the Force and using a lightsaber and so on. So Leia, at the end of this episode, is eventually, as she's running through this tunnel, is intercepted by Reva. And Reva's killed, I guess, the pilot, whoever that was going to take them out of there. So that's how the show ends. Now, the complaints about Obi Wan Kenobi seem to be that Obi Wan Kenobi is weak, that he needs help from Tala, who's a woman, and Leia, who sort of guides him along. and calls him old, which I thought was funny. The idea, I guess, is they feel that this man can't do anything, and that this is a sign of Disney, I guess you could say, emasculating their legacy characters. That's kind of how I interpret what's going on now with regards to criticisms. One such criticism seemed to indicate that the third episode of Obi Wan Kenobi was the worst thing to happen to Star Wars since The Last Jedi. Well, I love The Last Jedi. I think that's one of the best Star Wars films ever made. And but of course that's just my opinion. I also love The Mandalorian, which I think is one of the best streaming Star Wars stories I've seen by far. Obi Wan Kenobi is more subtle. It's a little slower paced, a little more leisurely, because it's examining the Obi-Wan character. Now, the fear is that Obi-Wan Kenobi will never be in control of his powers, and the Force will not be something he has control of, because these women are getting in the way, and they prove to be more powerful than Obi-Wan Kenobi. Well, somehow I doubt that. Secondly, yes, the battle between Darth and Kenobi is maybe certainly not as well staged as other ones that we've seen them in, particularly in the Star Wars prequel series. But that's only because, Kenobi is having problems. He can't quite focus. And he even has, a nightmare about Anakin Skywalker and everything else. So he's deeply affected by all this, because this was, after all, a pupil that he had taught and turned to the dark side, and, well, everything went to shit, to say the least. So we know that, and that's kind of what this story is about, but I don't think that people are really looking at it from that perspective. They see it more as, well, the women are taking over, and they need to help Kenobi. Well, sure, because if you think about it, even in Star Wars A New Hope, Obi-Wan Kenobi, played back in the day by Sir Alec Guinness, he needed a little help to get into the Death Star. He didn't get there by himself. Han Solo and Luke and company, they helped him get to the Death Star. It's funny how we forget certain things in the past. Kenobi needed help, and he needed Luke to train him and to guide him. Kenobi has always needed a little support. He just has. And also keep in mind that and I was thinking about this while even watching the show, Kenobi gave himself up to Darth Vader in the first Star Wars film, because he said, I'll be more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Yes, as a Force ghost, not as the last living Jedi before, well, aside from Darth and before Luke was being trained and receiving the tutelage he get to become one. These are things that I think people forget. And now in the prequel trilogy, he's much younger, he's more spry, Kenobi is just a different in that, because he's been using his lightsaber frequently. But even in Attack of the Clones, Kenobi loses against Count Dooku, if you recall, played by the late Christopher Lee. And sometimes Kenobi, he can be outmatched. So I don't really understand the issues. There are certain things, certainly with this third episode, I didn't quite understand. The point in which the stormtroopers don't let him through, and they're ready to get him. There's those red rays that are, certainly they can cut anybody in half, and it's joined by, or in between two mountainous hills. You would think that he would just maybe jump over it. I mean, he's Obi-Wan Kenobi. But he destroys the thing, and then he passes through. I mean, but that's such a minor complaint for an episode that's 48 minutes long. And this is the third episode, mind you, and already everybody's writing it off. So we don't really know what else is in store for this show, but I guess everybody just feels this is not going to be about Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's going to be about Force females. I have nothing against female characters having use of the Force. I think that's actually a good thing. I don't think it's going to overtake Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think at some point Kenobi's probably going to have to confront Reva. I'm sure there's going to be some sort of lightsaber battle. And since we know Obi-Wan Kenobi, spoiler alert, makes it into old age, played by Sir Alec Guinness, let's assume that if there is a lightsaber battle, he probably will defeat Reva. Who's to say he wouldn't, if it comes to that? Reva, of course, is probably going to betray Darth Vader. I mean, that's a possibility. You know, we don't know where this show is going. And the 4th episode will be an indication. I guess it's going to be a total of 6 episodes, if I'm not mistaken. Now, do I like this show better than The Mandalorian? No, not at all. But I don't. But I think it's fairly decent. I don't have any real complaints. There's something odd about Star Wars. Anytime anything is named Star Wars nowadays, and it's an offshoot with a portrayal of a legacy character or other characters, there is the need to attack, mostly when it comes to legacy characters. There's no reason why, for example, in the show, that Kenobi is just trying to regain control of his faculties, of his use with the Force. I think that's a good thing. That actually is good storytelling, because it had been a decade, and he's kind of refocusing, relearning himself. It's part of this thing that, I remember a photography teacher way back when I was living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, would often read the text that they gave us in the class, beginner's photography textbook, and he would often reread that just to sort of remind himself of what it means to be a photographer, to kind of just not lose sight of the basics. And I think that's what's happening with Kenobi. He has to kind of recharge himself. That's a good thing, because if the character started off as really very powerful and could manage to do anything, I mean, what story did anybody expect this to be after the prequel trilogy? What could this be? The Empire rose in prominence. The Emperor got his way. Darth Vader, is rising up in the ranks. So, of course, Kenobi, as we know, became a hermit. That was the story. And there's also some issue I think people had with Leia calling him Ben Kenobi and knowing him as Ben Kenobi. Well, I actually looked a little bit at a couple of scenes from Star Wars A New Hope, and she refers to him as Ben, and she also refers to him as Obi Wan. So I don't know where people are getting this idea that she should be referring him more as Ben than as Obi Wan. Whatever. Okay. I don't have an issue with the show. I don't think it's a great show, but I think it's good for what it is. I don't understand the issues. Being a Star Wars fan for years, and then not being one for many, many other years that followed. I'm going to be 51 years old, so you can imagine I approach Star Wars very differently than most people. I don't really heavily criticize it. We're talking Star Wars here. This is not even Lord of the Rings. This is not even, something that I take too seriously. It's Star Wars, for God's sakes. It's supposed to be somewhat fun, and I don't think it's always supposed to be logical or coherent, really, unless it was a story that just went off the rails completely. I liked Rogue One, but it's not one of my favorite Star Wars films at all. I think it's kind of more in the B- category. I would say this show gets, so far, probably close to a solid B, but I don't expect greatness just yet. Whereas The Mandalorian is a fast-paced show, and it has 2 very interesting characters. The Mandalorian himself and Grogu, and of course there's Carl Weathers and a bunch of other people on that show. They're all unique, different types of characters, and that's what makes that show what it was. So it's exciting to know there's going to be a 3rd season for that one. Mandalorian is just a whole different ball of wax. It's probably closer to the feel of the original Star Wars, or for some maybe the sequel trilogy. So I don't know. I think Ewan McGregor has shown more nuance with this character, and I like the storytelling. It makes sense to me, but not to everyone. So anyway, what are your thoughts out there on Obi Wan Kenobi, on the 3 episodes? Please, not too many hateful responses. Just, let's use some common sense about Star Wars and just focus on whatever in terms of the story itself. How do you think this should have been better, or do you think it's just fine as it is, and that you look forward to seeing what the next 3 episodes bring? At any rate, hit like and subscribe my channel. And I did receive 2 more subscribers. I don't get a whole lot of hits for this channel, but that's okay. That's how it is. So, this is Jerry Saravia at the Movies, signing off.